as people take the streets in the thousands. Many are wondering, what's going on? Is the pandemic over? Where are all the public health officials? Why aren't they saying, hey, you're going to kill people? You better get back inside. You have to shelter in place. This isn't right. Your lives are on the line. You're putting other people's lives at risk. This is what we've been hearing for months and months and months. And in fact, when we saw the spring breakers down in Florida, what were they told? They were told, wow, this is irresponsible of you. How dare you? You need to stay inside. You're killing people. Maybe you won't be affected, but you're going to give this to somebody else who may die. We also heard this being shouted at the protesters back in April, those who were protesting the lockdown. They were painted on the news as Trump supporting conservatives who were going out there risking everybody's lives. How selfish of them to go out there and protest, and maybe it won't affect them, but it might affect somebody else. We've been hearing this over and over and over again. But now we're seeing protests in the thousands, if not millions, all across this country have taken to the streets in protest for Black Lives Matter, which is a very important topic to discuss. And of course, police brutality is something that absolutely needs to end. Obviously a very important issue. But we have been told that no other issue matters more than the pandemic at this moment in time. This is what we've been told. However, suddenly, health officials say, no, you know what? Racism may be a bigger health issue than the pandemic, than this deadly new coronavirus that's been circulating around. Here was the article done by Politico saying, suddenly public health officials say social justice matters more than social distance. So let's go and see what they're talking about here. Jennifer Nuzzo, she's a Johns Hopkins epidemiologist. She tweeted on Tuesday, a week ago, in this moment, the public health risks of not protesting to demand an end to systemic racism greatly exceed the harms of the virus. So wait a minute. Some of us have been saying for the last few months that there are some serious ramifications to sheltering in place. There are now 40 million Americans who are out of work, 40 million Americans who have no idea how they're going to make their next paycheck in order to put food on the table. We have food banks in absolute crisis, saying they do not have enough food to feed these hungry families that are showing up at their doorstep. We have early cancer patients who did not get their screenings in time, and now they're going to be dealing with potentially death if they didn't catch their cancer early enough, depending on how aggressive it is, or going into more treatment than what they needed to do had they caught it early on. Root canals are now turning into extractions. Cavities are turning into root canals. We have numerous health issues that have really been a consequence of this shelter-in-place policy that they've enforced on us. And they've told us, listen, yes, you might lose your job, which means, sure, you might lose your home, but that's better than losing your life. That's what they've told us for months on end. This is how they talked us into sheltering in place and giving up everything we have because it's better than losing your life. But suddenly now, racism, which I agree, obviously, anything that is the Black Lives Matter movement, the Me Too movement. We've had several that have, for LGBTQ. All of these issues are very important, and they're issues that we need to pay attention to. But another issue that's important is, feeding your family, paying your bills, having a job. But suddenly, that isn't okay to protest for. That isn't okay when people are saying, you know what, I have to go work. I don't have a choice. I need to open up my business. You're going to force me to go under. I'm going to lose everything I've ever worked for. They said, sorry, you're being selfish. But suddenly now you can go out in the thousands and you can protest against racism. That's okay. It's really difficult now when we're seeing, let me just read you some more, because it's not just Jennifer Nuzzo, the Johns Hopkins epidemiologist, but here's another one. This one came from, this one is from the IHME. So the IHME is the model. They're the epidemiologists, the researchers that the government, that the Trump administration decided to use rather than using, there was that original model from the Imperial College of London, which was the real doom and gloom model. And they instead went to one that was, I believe that they are connected to the University of Washington. They are. They're connected to the University of Washington, and and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So take this for what you will, but they issued a statement. Now, as public health officials, you would expect that, especially if you were leading the pandemic. So they were the ones that would give the models for all the curves. So they're looking at, where are we at? Where are we going? What's the trajectory? When do they think we'll flatten the curve? And that they are the ones that Trump and Birx and Fauci, they've been turning to IHME. Okay. So they are public health officials. They should be public health officials that care first and foremost about public health. They shouldn't be political at all. So really a doctor should say, I get it. You've got all these things going on in your life, but here's just the nitty gritty of the medical side. And you just need to understand the medical side, and then you need to make your own choice, but you need to know the medicine. They issued a statement rather than saying what you think they would say, which is, hey, listen, you guys are going out there in the thousands, millions. You should understand that there is a pandemic going on, and the whole thing we've been saying to you this whole time that we've been seeing in our faces in the news has been, remember what happened to Philadelphia during the Spanish flu. They had a parade, and when they had a parade, suddenly everybody caught the flu, and a lot of death ravaged the whole city. So you would think that they would say, listen, we're in a pandemic. This is really bad. You guys are going out there in the thousands. That's not healthy during the middle of a crisis. I understand you want to protest. I understand you feel something that you're passionate about. But please understand we are in the middle of a public health crisis. But no, that's not what they said, because that would be the scientific thing to say. That would be the medical thing to say. Instead, they say racism is a public health issue. And they issue a statement saying fighting health inequality means fighting against racism. Black Lives Matter. They go on to have a statement, and they say, they don't talk about the pandemic. They don't talk about social distancing measures that they've been telling us are necessary. They don't say anything about this. They say we commit to working to produce the evidence that racism and discrimination are critical public health issues that demand an urgent response wherever they occur. An urgent response. But you keeping your job, no urgent response there. How dare you, you selfish bastard. You instead need to shelter in place. I don't care about how you're going to feed your family. I don't care about losing your business or your job. I don't care about you losing your life savings. You are being selfish if you think you should go out there and work. Yet, racism and discrimination, something that this country has been fighting since the dawn of time. And yes, it's urgent. Yes, it's something that we need to fix. And yes, it does cost people their lives. It's still something that we have been incrementally working on throughout time. And guess what, guys? We're going to continue to incrementally work on it. It's not going to be solved overnight by having demonstrations in the street by the thousands. Will we make some change? Yes. But will it be enough change? Will it solve the problem? No. But the problem that they've been telling us we have to solve is the coronavirus. That's the problem they've been telling us we have to solve. So then you've got, here's another one for you. The former head of the CDC, Dr. Tom Frieden, he writes, the threat to COVID control from protesting outside is tiny compared to the threat to COVID control created when governments act in ways that lose community trust. People can protest peacefully and work together to stop COVID. Wait a minute. We were told we had a shelter in place. What do you mean we can protest peacefully and work together to stop COVID? Why couldn't we go to work and work together to stop COVID? Why couldn't we keep our businesses open and work together to stop COVID? But suddenly, no, you can't do any of those things. Screw you and your family and your need to eat. We can work together and protest peacefully and stop COVID at the same time. This is what the former head of the CDC says. He says, violence harms public health. Actually, let me just double check to make sure that this guy was the former head of the CDC. I read that somewhere, and I didn't actually check that. So let's check that now. Well, it says here he's in the Democratic Party, and here we are thinking, yes, he was the director of the CDC from 2009 to 2017, okay? And here we are thinking that this whole pandemic wasn't political. And there were many of us who believed, like myself, I was still holding out hope that this wasn't really a political thing, that this was instead maybe people were overreacting in my mind, or they weren't really fully paying attention to the science. There was that, but I wasn't really thinking that it was fully political. I mean, in fact, who was it? Trish Reagan that lost her job on Fox for basically calling it a political ploy. And it's really hard to not think it's slightly political when suddenly public health officials who claimed that their only concern was our health and safety, that they weren't political at all, that they weren't getting in the middle of that they were just concerned with public health and safety, and that our political leaders would have to weigh what they were saying and all of the other things in our lives. They would have to take all of it into consideration when making public policy. And now suddenly when public health officials from Johns Hopkins and Center for Disease Control and the IHME, suddenly when they come out and they say, you know what, forget all that social distancing stuff, but racism matters more, go out there, protest, it's okay, when they don't say, hey, listen, this is going to only make things worse, because that's what they've been saying this whole time, it suddenly casts doubt that perhaps actually maybe this whole thing really was very political. And now you've got Tom Frieden, who's a Democrat, who was appointed by Barack Obama to the CDC. And suddenly he's saying, you know what? You could protest safely and combat COVID. You've got the IHME, which was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And you've got people there who feel, there's a lot of people who are already distrustful of Bill Gates and what his motivations might be financially. And, and then suddenly they're saying, as we see the curves flattening, they're saying, go ahead, go out there and protest. Go ahead. So listen, I personally don't think these protesters are going to get it and spread it, because I believe that the weather, they're outside, it's sunlight, they're not likely to catch this and spread this. I've been saying that from the beginning. But here's the thing. I've been one of the only people saying this from the beginning. And a lot of people were giving me hell about that. So a lot of people were saying, no, you're wrong. And no, what you're saying is inaccurate. And so consistency matters. So if you're in the camp that believes that, no, I'm wrong, that this virus is deadly and can spread anywhere and everywhere, and that the weather has nothing to do with it, then you need to start asking some questions about these public health officials who are now telling you that you can go out there and protest and be fine. Either, one, they also agree with me, and they're not maybe saying it, but they agree with those of us who think that maybe the reaction was overblown. Maybe there's a lot of science that shows that this virus doesn't spread outside like it does indoors, that there's other factors at play. Maybe they actually agree with those stances, and they don't think that there's really that big of a risk right now for protesters. Or there's something even more sinister going on there. And perhaps, I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, that perhaps there are some people who want the pandemic to continue because they have financial gain to be had from the pandemic continuing, whether they are continuing to sell the fear in the news and their newspapers, or packages that get delivered, or vaccines that need to be made, right? So it's one of two things. Either they really don't believe the virus is that deadly after all, and that they believe that weather has a lot to do with it, and they're just not willing to admit that because Trump said it in the very beginning and they don't want him to ever be right, or there's something even more sinister going on there. So otherwise, how do you explain this? How do you explain that suddenly they've switched their tone and suddenly your job doesn't matter? This is how it was. You were told, and this is where I cannot get over this. I cannot get over this. This just makes me so upset that somebody's livelihood, their ability to feed their family, their self-esteem, their self-worth, their job, their communities that are going to go way up in crime now. Now we're going to see spikes in crime. I mean, hello, we saw cities all around this country get destroyed, segments of the city. Santa Monica, just down the street from me, is destroyed. Downtown is destroyed. Lots of areas of Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Melrose, downtown Los Angeles. That's just in my city. There's Chicago, Atlanta. I mean, look what happened to CNN and their building. Plenty of areas were destroyed. So we're going to see high rises of crime. And we've got more crime. We've got desperate people who can't feed themselves or their families, people who've lost their jobs, and now they're in a market competing with 40 million other people for a job. Good luck trying to find one when everybody else around you is unemployed. Good luck. And good luck trying to negotiate for a good salary. No, You're competing against a lot of people. They can pay you a lot less. But none of that was a public health issue. Doctor's office shutting down, not screening people for early diabetes, not screening people for early cancers or for early heart disease. None of that seems to be a health issue. But suddenly, political protesting is. You need to make what you will of that, but that is very suspect and infuriating for those of us that believed that even if they were misguided, even if they weren't totally reading all the science and, there was a little bit of pressure at play there, believed that these medical professionals were truly, truly trying their best in the interest of public health. And that now is kind of in question when you start to see what's going on. And you don't have the political leaders telling people, hey, guys, public health crisis, this isn't okay. Get inside, like they've been saying to us for months and months on end. I mean, this is really outrageous to me. Again, I don't think we're going to see a big spike in cases from the protesters. I'm not that worried about it. Just like I wasn't that worried about the spring breakers in Florida, and I wasn't that worried about those who were protesting the lockdown in April, because I'm consistent in this argument that, you can catch it in some places more than you can others, and that certain measures of social distancing will do just fine. But I also consistently was not for the lockdown, was not for forcing people out of their jobs and their livelihoods. But that consistency has been lost, and everybody has turned into a hypocrite, including public health officials.